I have bore witness to one of the most controversial films of our time, Snow White.
You serious?
Now, I wish I was joking about that, but unfortunately, I am not. Snow White has been the talk of the town for a very long time now, between Rachel Ziegler, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but her many comments about the 1937 film, people's generalized hatred towards Gal Gadot, Peter Dinklage's comments about whether or not little people actors should be playing the Seven Dwarves, reports saying that the Seven Dwarves weren't going to be in the film at all, and the many delays and reshoots that this movie went under, and that's just scratching the surface. I'm sure there's many more things that I don't know about because I typically stay out of tabloid media. But the movie finally did release, and it's out, despite the fact that the marketing department, after all of this PR mess, probably looks like Eddie after he fought Rolf. Nevertheless, I've gotten a chance to see the film, and I have thoughts. Those thoughts being...
This is...
What?
It's alright, like...
Yeah, this movie's alright. I enjoyed watching it when I went to the theater, and everyone in my theater experienced it, both from children all the way up to elderly people, those who came together as families, those who went by themselves. Everyone seemed to enjoy it when I had left the theater, but yeah, this movie isn't anything crazy, let alone the level of hatred that it's getting. You would think this movie grabbed someone's child and slapped it across the face, because the way people hate this movie is completely absurd. It is currently the lowest rated film on IMDb, beneath Dragon Ball Evolution. I don't think you heard me properly. Snow White is regarded as worse than Dragon Ball Evolution, the movie that resulted in Akira Toriyama coming out of retirement and making more Dragon Ball stuff. That movie is considered better than Snow White. The movie that the actor who played Piccolo, when he became Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super, hid the fact that it was him because he didn't want anyone to know that it was him portraying the character, so they wouldn't associate that performance with Dragon Ball Evolution. That's the movie that's better than Snow White. The same movie that has shit like this in it.
Dragon Ball Energy, DBE. Catchy name.
Every move you're on.
Special.
This movie is better than Snow White. Get the hell out of my face with that, man. This is ridiculous. This is how I know this movie is just being hated on to be hated on, because this isn't even the worst Disney live action remake. It's not like The Lion King that completely character assassinated any sort of love and ingenuity in terms of the visual style of it as compared to the original. This is something like Mulan or Pinocchio, where those movies completely missed the point of the themes and messaging of their animated counterpart. And this isn't something like Peter Pan that had a lot of elements that they couldn't put into a movie today because they're significantly outdated and offensive because, well, they were fine back then, but they're not now, so they had to rewrite a bunch of elements of the movie. None of that is the case with Snow White. For the most part, this movie is a copy and paste of the animated film. It sure adds stuff to it and changes like a handful of things, but I don't think any of that stuff really messes with the film. If anything, it adds more depth because, let's be honest, the 1937 Snow White is a bit shallow.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I know, that's a hot take, but listen, I have a unique perspective from this movie because up until a few hours before I saw the remake of Snow White, I had not seen the 1937 Snow White.
Not scientifically possible!
I grew up only knowing the story of that movie because of cultural osmosis, other adaptations of the story like from Once Upon a Time and Snow White and the Huntsman. Hell, it was to the point that I didn't even realize that the Evil Queen and Maleficent weren't the same person. I thought Maleficent was both of those characters and she was just in Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. But I know the difference now, but back when I was a kid and I saw her in Kingdom Hearts for the first time, I thought they were the same person. But all of that aside, because I just watched that movie today in 2025, well, not today. I saw this movie like a couple weeks ago from when I'm recording this video. But anyway, since I actually watched the movie, I thought it was just fine. I think for 1937, it was a great movie. And I obviously respect the film for its cultural significance in the film industry and animation history as a whole. But let's be honest here. If I were to erase everyone's memory in the world of 1937 Snow White and release it in theaters today, it would bomb. Because it doesn't hold up to the same critical level of scrutiny that we hold films to in the modern era. There would be a lot of problems that critics would tear it apart for. Having shallow characters, a main villain whose plan that doesn't make any sense, extremely important characters that only show up in 2 scenes of the movie. I'm looking at you, Prince Charming. A middle of the film that basically pauses the main narrative and just has Snow White and the 7 Dwarves dick around doing bits for the entire middle of the film. It has so many flaws that people would criticize nowadays, but we don't. You want to know why? Because the movie's almost 100 years old. We don't make these complaints about it because we know that the movie came out a vast long time ago. So it gets a pass. Circling back around to the remake now, all of the changes it made were there to elevate the film. Do all of them work? Absolutely not. But they were made with the intention of improving upon what the original did. It's not in the same boat as some of the other Disney remakes, where if you literally just copy and pasted the movie into live action, it would still be peak. That's not the case here. This movie was very shallow and wouldn't hold up to modern day critics, so that's why they added more things, to give more characters depth, to give the backstory of everything going on in the world more depth, to make it feel more like a modern film. Not in the sense that people hate it like, oh, it's a woke film DEI, like not that. I mean like modern in the sense of it would be written by someone that is trying to appease the modern audience's critical mind for film media in general. That's what they did with this. And like I said, not everything works in this movie. A lot of the things that don't work in this movie were the changes, and they end up crippling the film. Biggest thing in my part, the 7 bandits. The 7 bandits in this movie are completely useless characters. They're here because, most likely, Disney was going to originally make this movie as Snow White and the 7 bandits instead of the 7 dwarves, and those characters were in the film prior to the reshoots. Because in this movie, almost all of them, I'm pretty sure like 5 out of the 7 of them do not have a single line in the movie. There are 2 of them that have lines. One of them is played by a little person who is just a gimmick. He just talks about how he's like the best at using crossbows 90% of the time. And I'm like, bro, I don't care. Get out of my face. You're irrelevant to this film. And the other one has a really awkward line that really exemplifies the fact that like, oh yeah, these were probably supposed to be the stand-ins for the 7 dwarves. There's a scene in the movie where Snow White, the 7 dwarves, Jonathan, who is the surrogate for Prince Charming in this film because he's a thief instead of a prince, which I'll get more into later. But all of them and the 7 bandits have a party, and it results in the end of the party being Jonathan and 7 bandits being like, we have to go because we're going to ward off the Queen's army from finding Snow White. And one of them walks up to Snow White and he just goes, "Thank you for bringing back happiness into our lives," and then leaves. And I was like,
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
you have said nothing the rest of this movie, yet this one random line was kept. And then I stopped and thought about it for a second. I was like, was he supposed to be like happy? Like, was he supposed to be the stand-in for Happy as a part of the 7 bandits? And then I started thinking about it more, and then the little person actor who's always talked about the crossbow, he's like always angry, and I'm like, was he supposed to be grumpy? Like, is this what they were originally going to do? They were going to be the parallels to the 7 dwarves, and it's just, it didn't work. I didn't like them in the movie, and they basically do nothing. The one that talks about the crossbow all the time, he saves Snow White's life at the very end of the film, but I'll talk about that more when we get into the 3rd act. But yeah, things like that, they don't work for the movie. The 3rd act of the movie doesn't work, but again, gotta talk about that in a bit. There are other elements of this movie that are just bad in general. They're not because anything was changed, they just don't work. It's the musical aspects of the movie. There is almost zero choreography in any of these musical sequences, and it's abysmal. I'm not a theater kid. I typically don't go to plays. I've been to one that my family brought me to when I was a kid, and I went to one that my friends asked me to go to when we were in high school. That's it. I've been to 2 in my entire life. So if I notice that there was no choreography in the dance sequences during the musical segments, That is a problem because people who do love theater stuff, who do have an appreciation for musicals that are going to see this movie, they're going to clock it in like half a second and it's going to really piss them off. So I don't understand why this was chosen for the movie, especially because Rachel, who plays the main character, has been in musical films before, that being the remake of West Side Story. The girl can sing and she can dance. I don't know why you wouldn't choreograph stuff in this film. It's mainly just comprised of characters standing around and talking to each other. It's really awkward to see. And at that point, if you didn't want to choreograph these sequences, why have them in the movie? It's also really bad that this movie released after Wicked, because that's a fantastic musical movie, and you watch that, and people are still riding the high off of that, and then you see Snow White, and you're just like,
I don't really want this.
Bad part of the movie has even more flaws than that, though. It shares some of the flaws from the original movie, because they didn't change a vast amount of stuff from the original plot. They keep it more or less the same by just adding in new things. So the Queen's plan to kill Snow White still makes no sense. I thought this both watching the 1937 one and the remake. Why doesn't she just hit her with the Batman v Superman prison special? Yeah, just shank the bitch. Why doesn't she just shank Snow White? It would solve all of her problems. There is no reason she needed to keep the girl alive. She took over the kingdom. Why is she alive? Like, in the original movie, they bring up the fact that she was self-aware that Snow White would be fairer than her, which is why she turned her into a servant so she would always look disheveled. But, like, why didn't you just kill her then? If you knew that was the case, why didn't you just kill her? And then when she becomes an adult and the mirror is like, well, she is fairer than you. You're like, okay, I'm going to send a huntsman to take her out into the woods and then kill her. Why? Just kill her in the castle. You're an evil queen with magical powers. Like, why are you doing all of this extra nonsense? It's the same in both the original and in the remake. She could just shank Snow White in the middle of the castle. Who's gonna stop her? She's in control of everything. No one's going to complain about it. It doesn't make any sense. And then when she escapes and she finds out that she's in the woods, she goes like, okay, she survived the assassin. I'm gonna turn myself into an old woman and trick her into eating a poison apple.
How did you get past security? His fortress is impenetrable.
Door was unlocked.
Son of a bitch!
Just shank her! Like, just wrap it up mad easy. I don't understand why you would go through all of this nonsense just to kill one girl when you could do it in a very simple and easy way. It doesn't make any sense, and they kept that. So, you know, if you want to complain that the movie's bad, then you have to address the fact that a lot of the elements that make it bad are from the original. This is a dumb plot point from the original that is in this movie. So, you know, you gotta call a spade, bro. You can't just cherry pick the good and then leave out the bad. Doesn't work that way. Hell, arguably, I would say the Evil Queen is dumber in this than she is in the original. Because in the original, she doesn't know that Prince Charming exists when she feeds Snow White the poison apple. But in this remake, Gal Gadot's Evil Queen is very well aware that Snow White has fallen in love with the bandit thief Jonathan, and she has him locked in prison. They even exemplify this by when the Evil Queen reads the page of the journal that tells her how to be freed from the poison apple. It cuts to Jonathan because she's like, oh, she can only be saved from true love's kiss. Cuts to Jonathan in the cage, and she's like, and I'm like, so you know there's a way that she can get out of it. Like, I get it, you have him chained to a wall in a prison, but, like, people escape from prison all the time, so wouldn't you want to just, like, kill him, you know? Like, wouldn't that be a safer bet than leaving him alive so that he can then save Snow White? Because that's exactly what happens in the movie. She goes, feeds her the apple, goes back to the castle, thinks she's won, Jonathan escapes, kisses Snow White, wakes her up, and the third act of the movie begins, and I'm just like, if you would have just killed him, that would have made things easier. And that is one point I will give the original over this remake, is that it makes more sense because the Evil Queen just didn't know Prince Charming existed. I mean, she also dies after feeding her the poison apple, so she wouldn't be able to stop it anyway. But still, she didn't know he existed, so feeding her a poison apple to put her into a coma seemed plausible to a ridiculous degree, because again, you could have just stabbed her and it would have solved everything. But I've harped on that enough. And of course, the biggest issue of the film, that being the third act of the movie. This third act is an entire mess of a filmmaking process. I don't know what the hell happened. I can tell it's been reshot from something I'll bring up in a second, but holy moly, is this entire thing abysmal. So what happens is, Jonathan Snow White, she gets woken up from the kiss, they embrace, they kiss again to show that they've truly fallen in love with each other, and they're like, okay, we've got to stop the evil queen. So Jonathan, the 7 bandits, and the 7 dwarves, they all sneak into the castle, which actually, we're going to put a pin in this for a second because I forgot to mention another thing that really pissed me off about the 7 bandits earlier. On top of them having no agency in the film and being virtually useless, they're also a bunch of dickheads. Because there's a moment in the movie where Jonathan saves Snow White's life, and he gets shot in the shoulder with a bow and arrow, or crossbow, one of the two, and they bring him to Doc of the 7 Dwarves, because they're like, well, your name's Doc, you're a doctor, right? And he's like, no, I'm not that kind of doctor, but I can try and save his life. And the rest of the dwarves are like, well, why would we help them? They're a bunch of criminals and bandits that steal from people like us. And then the bandits get mad and are about to start a fight with the 7 dwarves to force them to save Jonathan. And I'm just sitting there like, I kind of agree with the dwarves because they don't know these people and they're a bunch of assholes. So like, why would they help you save your criminal boss that steals from people that work 9-to-5 jobs? This makes no sense. And the fact that you're about to start a fight with them because they won't save your evil boss. Well, he's not evil, but to them he's evil. Like, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. He's not like Robin Hood who steals from the rich and gives to the poor. Like, he's just a bandit in general. There's no reason why they would want to help them, and you're being dickheads about it anyway. So yeah, that was also not something I appreciated. And then, like, Snow White convinces them by being like, this is all the evil queen's fault. She wants us to fight each other. I'm just like, I don't think the evil queen has anything to do with the situation right now. I think your friends that you made are a bunch of dickheads, and they're trying to force your other friends into helping them, and they don't want to do that. So, yeah. Sorry for the sidebar, but I was reminded of that. But anyway, back to the third act. Snow White has to go to the castle while 7 dwarves, 7 bandits, and Jonathan sneak into the castle and arm themselves. And it's like, okay, cool, so like a big fight's about to break out or something. So Snow White shows up to the kingdom, and everyone in the kingdom, even though it's been like a decade or so since they've seen Snow White, who was a child at the time, they all immediately recognize her, and they're like, oh my goodness, it's Princess Snow White. We can stop being oppressed now. And they all rally behind her as she goes to the evil queen's castle. And the evil queen comes out and meets Snow White on the bridge. So now the setup for the scene is that the whole kingdom is behind Snow White. Then the evil queen and Snow White are on a bridge. And then behind the evil queen is the army. Well, it's just like a handful of guards that are soldiers from her army. And the castle. So the two of them start having a back and forth on the bridge, right? And the evil queen eventually creates like a diamond dagger, and she's just like, here, Snow White, if you want to save this kingdom, just stab me. Mind you, before this, the evil queen spouted a bunch of nonsense saying that, oh, no one wants Snow White to really be queen of the kingdom because Snow White just believes in being a good person and being helpful and nice to individuals. And sure, people might say they want that, but that's not really what they want because it won't make their lives better. What they really want is like vanity, is basically what she's talking about. And she creates like a diamond rose instead of Snow White's like real rose that will wilt away, because she's like, flowers wilt, but diamond never does. People want vanity. That's why I'm the perfect queen. And I'm just like, now everybody's pretty miserable. I don't think anyone here buys any of the bullshit that you're talking about right now, but sure, pal, whatever. Go off, queen. And then she creates the diamond dagger and hands it to Snow White and then goes like, kill me if you want your kingdom back. And of course, Snow White doesn't do that. But again, I'm like, why don't you just... I'm pretty sure everyone in the kingdom would agree with you for doing that. I don't think there's a single person that would be like, oh my goodness, I can't follow her. She's so terrible. She murdered the evil tyrannical monarch that took over our kingdom and murdered our king. No, I can't do it. Like, I don't think anybody is gonna give a damn. I think they would all be like, fuck yeah, bitch, you stabbed her. Go off, Snow White's the new queen. Like, that's how realistically it would have happened, but it's a Disney movie, so that's not gonna happen. So she, like, gives the evil queen back the knife and is like, no, I will not kill you. because I'm pure of heart. And I'm just like, what is this Kingdom Hearts bullshit? I love Kingdom Hearts, but like, what is this Kingdom Hearts bullshit? And the evil queen's like, yep, figured you wouldn't stab me, hands the diamond dagger to one of the soldiers and is like, kill Snow White. And the guy is about to stab her, and the dumbest scene of the movie then transpires. Right before he stabs Snow White, she's basically like, your name is William. You were a cherry picker that owned a farm where you would let people come and pick cherries from your trees during the weekend because you were such a good person. And he's like, Nani? How did you know that? And then she like turns to like the other two guards and she's like, you're Jeffrey. You were a baker. Your father loved you and you would never hurt a fly. And you're Cassian, I don't remember what their names were. And she goes about like how he was a good person as well. And she's like, I remember what it was like when this kingdom was all about kindness and fairness and good and everyone was happy and this evil queen lady wasn't here ruining all of our lives. Do you really want to be working for this lady? And they're just like, you know what, she kind of right. We don't have to do this, which is true, mind you. Something I didn't mention earlier is that in the opening narration for the movie that explains how the evil queen took over the kingdom, she tricks the king into going into a trap with his soldiers, and they all end up dying, right? We don't see it happen, but like we're told that's what happens. And the evil queen is now queen of the kingdom, and she tells all of the farmers, is what they say in the narration, to become her new soldiers, and they become the evil queen's evil army. So they're just normal people that loved the village and kingdom that they lived in and took care of it. And the evil queen's like, I need you to be an evil jerk now. And they're like, well, the queen told us we gotta do it, you know. It's not like we know Snow White's in the castle and is the rightful heir to the throne, even though she's like 12 or whatever right now. We gotta listen to the evil queen now and oppress her people and her family members. And I'm like, why did I sound like Kel from Good Burger?
Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Can I take your order?
But anyway, the main point is they all just decide to work for the evil queen just because she said so. And I'm like, bro, that's not how that would work. Like, that'd be the equivalent of if right now I broke into the Oval Office, declared myself president, and then made a public statement saying that every retail worker in America had to be my personal task force. No one would listen to me. That's not how that works. So I don't understand why anyone listened to the evil queen. So when Snow White tells them this, that they're all good people and they want to go back to the way things were prior to the evil queen, they all just go like, yeah, she's right. We don't have to do this. And the evil queen's like,
I did not see this coming in a million years.
well, then I'll kill Snow White myself. And she grabs the dagger and goes to stab Snow White. And then this is when Jonathan, the seven bandits, and the seven dwarves show up. And the one that's always talked about, he's great with the crossbow, shoots a crossbow, and knocks the dagger out of her hand. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if the effect just wasn't, like, developed enough, but, like, it looked like the dagger just, like, flew out of her hand. I don't know if it's because I just missed it or if the effect wasn't properly finished, but I did not see the arrow come in from, like, off screen to hit the dagger out of her hand. If you saw it and you saw this movie, cool. But for me, it kind of just, like, there was, like, a spark, like a flash of light on the dagger, and then she dropped it. And I was like, what was that? Originally, when I saw it, I thought it was going to be like a pure of heart thing. Like the evil queen couldn't kill Snow White because she is the fairest of them all. She is the most beautiful and most pure person of heart. So she literally couldn't stab her because of like BS good guy magic. But no, that's not the case. Then it cuts to like the top of the drawbridge that like, well, not drawbridge, but the gate that opens up into the castle, and then the guy's like holding the crossbow and he's like, yeah, I told you I'm such and such, the king of crossbows or whatever. I'm like, get your ass off the screen, bro. Ain't nobody care about you. But now the evil queen, even though she can create daggers like Shiro does with unlimited blade works, I'm like, you could just create another dagger and just shank Snow White in a position where that guy can't shoot it out of your hand. But whatever, fine. I don't get catharsis in this film. It's okay. But she's then like, well, damn, what do I do now? Because she's in a panic. Because as I mentioned the layout of this scene earlier, she's caught in between a rock and a hard place. There's the soldiers that no longer work for her behind her. There's Snow White in the kingdom in front of her. And then the seven dwarves are blocking the entrance to the castle, like the front door. And then there are Jonathan and the seven bandits on top of the front gate of the castle with a crossbow trained at her. So she has nowhere to go. And I'm like, okay, cool, so the movie's over. Wrong! She then proceeds to run past all of the guards, all of the seven bandits, and Jonathan, and everyone and open the door and get back into the castle. This is the worst edit in the entire movie. She literally turns around like, oh no, and then goes to run, and then it cuts and she's inside the castle. And I'm like, what? Whoa, hold up now. There was like 20 people blocking you from getting inside this castle. How did you juke them? What are you, LeBron James? You just out here breaking ankles? Like, what's going on here? How did you get back inside this castle? This is absurd. Mind you, I don't even know if LeBron James breaks ankles. I don't watch basketball. I just picked a basketball player's name that I know people would know. So like, I don't know why I needed to tell you that. It was just on my mind, so I did. The Evil Queen is inside of the castle now. She goes up to the magic mirror, and then randomly out of nowhere, after everything that's happened, she's just like, am I the fairest of them all? Now, something I've heard people criticize from the reviews that I've seen is that they're like, well, if the Evil Queen had got, like, shot in the face, like she was injured, like part of her skin got, like, cut or something like that when she got hit with the crossbow, that would justify why she would ask if she's still the fairest of them all, because she has a blemish on her body now. But that's not really the case. She kind of just gets defeated in a battle of wits because everyone's just like, we don't have to put up with you anymore. So we're not going to put up with you anymore. So then she goes up to the mirror. She's just like, am I the fairest of them all still? And the mirror just goes, no, you're not. Physically, you're bad as hell. But you're a terrible person on the inside. And that's why Snow White will always be more fair than you. And, like, that doesn't work. Like, I know I'm thinking about it too much, because I'm an adult who went to go see Snow White, but thinking about it from like the in-depth standpoint of how this mirror works. Originally, in 37's movie, fairest of them all just meant to the person that was the sexiest. That's what it meant. But in this, it's a culmination of both physical and inner beauty. So you mean to tell me that there wasn't like a 5 with a good personality that was more fair than the Evil Queen? It had to be Snow White specifically, being both a good person and more fair. And if that's the case, and that's what you were going by, Snow White would have always been fairer than the Evil Queen. So, like, this doesn't really work that well. But you don't have time to think about that, because all of a sudden, this turns into a horror movie. I'm not even kidding. The way the Evil Queen goes out in this film is just, like, out of nowhere, so dark. Because basically, she gets pissed that the mirror told her that she's not the fairest of them all anymore. And she breaks the mirror. The mirror then turns into, like, a Shadow Realm black hole. And then it rots her body. And she turns completely black and ends up looking like the mummy from The Mummy. And then she gets sucked into it and disintegrated. And then the mirror closes around her. And I was just sitting there like...
Starts a conversation like that. I just sat down.
Because, like, what the hell was that? What in the general hell is that? Like, people talked about how, this is what I mean when I say people hate this movie just for hating this movie, because they say the way the Evil Queen died in the original was more gruesome, and I'm sorry, she just fell off of a cliff in the original. That's not gruesome. People fall to death all the times in movies. That's not gruesome at all. But being rotted into a black corpse and then disintegrated, I think that's more gruesome than just falling off of a cliff. Like, what? Really? Come on, people. Like, let's be real here. But yeah, that's the third act of the movie. Then everything's fine and dandy and everything is woohoo, great. Now, I know I've been harping on the negatives of this movie for a while, because let's be honest, people have probably wanted to just hear me harp on how bad this movie is, even though I do say it has good points, which I will get into now. The good parts of this movie, Rachel Zegler. I think she does a good performance as Snow White. She's a decent actor. I haven't seen her in anything that she was good outside of musicals, because I don't like Shazam 2. I know I've spoken about it before on this channel, but I don't like Shazam 2. She was like whatever in that movie because the movie was written poorly, but the other 2 times that I've seen her in stuff were both musicals, that being West Side Story and this. She did a good job in both of those. I like the 7 dwarves in this movie. I know that a lot of people hate the way that they look because they're like hyper realistic and they say they're nightmare fuel. I'm a weirdo because like one of my favorite animated comedies of all time is Hoodwinked, so I can live with bad looking CGI looking stuff, so it doesn't really bother me that much as most people, and I'll admit that's just a me thing, and I understand that's not going to apply to everybody else, but I enjoyed them in the movie, and I really enjoyed Dopey, as a matter of fact. This is something that I know, hot take that no one's going to agree with me with. I like Dopey in the movie. I think that them changing his character from him being, Riley, help me out here. That, I think them changing him from being that to being a character who basically has social anxiety works significantly better than what it was before. Dopey in the original is just really dumb, and he does dumb things, and people found that endearing, which is completely fair, because everyone loves a dumb character. But Dopey in this, he's still goofy and dumb, but he just has social anxiety. He can't find it in himself to talk to people, and then once he interacts with Snow White, he eventually gains the confidence in himself to then speak to others. And that's what happens at the end of the movie. We're revealed that Dopey was actually the person narrating the entire movie to us because he was reading the story of Snow White to the people of the kingdom. And he just talks in general now. And I'm like, okay, cool. I like that. That's a good little character arc that adds depth to a character that was pretty shallow in the original film. I think that works significantly better. And I really love the interactions between Snow White and Jonathan in this movie. A lot of people complain that he's not a prince anymore, and it's just like, I mean, like, him being a prince in the original didn't matter either. I don't know why that's such a big issue that people have, because, yeah, he was Prince Charming in the original, but him being a prince didn't matter at all, because he just shows up. He could have just been a random dude that lived in the kingdom in that movie, because he just shows up, sees Snow White, they fall in love at first sight, and then he only shows up at the end of the movie to kiss Snow White, and then he's like, yeah, by the way, you know, I'm a prince, so I'm gonna take you to be the queen of my kingdom. And she's like, okay, cool, that's it. Like, him being a prince has no narrative significance on that movie, so I don't know why people were so pissed off that he isn't a prince in this movie. Because, like, this, I find him more interesting as, like, this pseudo-Robin Hood-esque bandit that met Snow White by trying to rob the castle, and the two of them build a relationship together. Yes, it 100% is a ripoff of the relationship between Flynn and Rapunzel in Tangled. That's 100% what this is going for. But I like that couple, and I think them doing it again here worked. I enjoyed their relationship. The only time I had an issue with it was during their song Princess Problems, just because, like, I feel like Snow White would agree with Jonathan in this, because he's complaining to her about, like, how she doesn't understand the world or whatever, and talking about how, like, everything seems like a princess problem to her, that she doesn't know how things really are, and I'm just like, I don't know, she's kind of been locked up as a servant to the evil queen for her entire life. I feel like the stuff you're saying also applies to her, and the two of you would have a similar agreement on what you're talking about, but that was the one time I had any sort of issue with it. But other than that, I feel like they fleshed out their relationship so, like, it felt more natural when they fell in love with each other, as opposed to, like, oh my goodness, you're like the first guy I've seen in who knows how long, I love you. And he's like, oh my god, you're hot, I like you. You know, like, I think this works better because it just adds more depth to their characters. So there are things to enjoy about this movie. But, like I said, it has its problems, as I have extensively discussed, which is why I probably wouldn't recommend this movie to people to go see. There are other movies that you could take your family to go see if you're someone that has a kid that wants to go see a good movie. You know, go see this. Please. I'm begging you. Go see The Day the Earth Blew Up. Please, seriously, go watch this movie. I already made a video talking about people going to see it, but I'm going to shill it as much as possible. Go see this goddamn movie. But yeah, if you want to watch Snow White when it comes out on streaming or whatever, you want to rent it or whatever, I think that's fine. I think you'll enjoy it. I don't think the hate this movie is getting is really justified because, again, it doesn't really work as a copy and paste movie like some people say it should have been. It doesn't really have anything egregious that ruins the film with the stuff that they added. You know, it's just generalized, like, poor writing standpoints or problems that it had in both the 37 one and this one. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Snow White. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm sure there are people who've probably seen this that probably clicked off when I said I liked the movie and told me to go fuck myself. So if you made it to the end of the video, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. I hope you have a wonderful day, because, you know, I don't want you to have a bad one. Like, why would I want that? Like, how would that benefit me in any way, shape, or form? But yeah, have a good one, and never forget, I am the innocent villain. I'm innocent until proven villainous, and I will catch you in whatever I end up talking about next. We'll see what that happens to be. Peace.